same loudness. And they realized that adjusting the level is not equivalent to sensation of the loudness level change. So that was the first realization that something more complex has to be developed in order to measure loudness, not to measure level. And then what now gets done in this standard is that this is your single channel audio. This method actually works for single channel, stereo channel, and surround systems. They give the example of a 5.1 system in this recommendation. So what they do first is they take the audio waveform, then they take a 400 millisecond buffer, and then they do some processing, and they repeat this with 75% overlap. So there's a 25% difference here. Then you do it again. You again take 400 milliseconds of audio, you process it, and so on. So this is the first stage. The next stage is that you apply two filters. And these filters have to do with the acoustical effect of your head and the way people judge loudness. So this is your head effect, and that's your loudness judgment effect. And these filters are described in the standard. And so you put your 400 milliseconds worth of audio through these two filters. And then you get here, and then you calculate the power. So you take the mean square of the 400 milliseconds of data. So after that, you have one number here. And this is your 400 milliseconds of time, and that's your data squared. Then you have multiple channels here, and they are not equivalent, so they will contribute to your sensation of loudness in a different way according to where the channel is located. And this is accounted by this gain. So there's a multiplication with a gain. And then after that, there's a calculation that then gives you the number that is the loudness. And that number is given by this deviation here. So, if you have multiple channels and not a single channel, this is the example of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 channels here. It's a surround system. You do the same for every single channel. Here you get all the numbers for the individual channels. You sum them together and you get one number. And then you calculate the loudness and you're done.
May I just add one thing, Aki? This correction here, that's the number that makes it precise at 1 kilohertz and nowhere else. So it's only if you have 1 kilohertz tone, what I said to you before would work.
Yes. Yeah, there are these deeper things that require that you read this PDF, and then you can find out more details about that. But it's a mechanistic process. But the result of this, when you think about this for a few minutes, you clearly understand that this is not equivalent to the dB of SPL or dB of signal level, because we are doing these human-related modifications to these numbers. Let's jump over to discussing the immersive audio in monitoring. Now, our starting point, of course, is very simple. We live in immersive audio all the time, but our sound reproduction systems have not been delivering those to us until now. Now we are kind of at the borderline, moving to a situation where we can actually listen to systems that create this kind of sensation that you are surrounded by audio, things are happening in this space around you. Now when we try to model this, then at the scientific level, then you don't want to limit things. So you want to have something like this. This actually exists in the UK. I was giving a lecture to these guys some weeks ago, and they have this kind of experimental environment where they have basically an unlimited number of loudspeakers, an unlimited number of levels here, so that they can create a system that can implement an unlimited precision for reproduction. And they can find out that how many points of radiation do I need in order to give a realistic presentation of an immersive audio. What we are dealing with basically is exactly the same thing that we are dealing with in stereophonic systems. So this principle has now been extended to surround audio, so speakers on one plane, and now we are moving towards immersive audio with speakers around you and on multiple levels. What we are doing is we are creating virtual sound images. So we are creating impression of sound being over there, or over there. And we want that sound image to be precise, well-defined, having high quality, and all of these good things. And of course, when we start having multiple of those, then we create this sensation of being enveloped. Now, when we move to immersive audio, then we can also do this. We can create a virtual sound image using more than 2 loudspeakers. In this case, 3 loudspeakers. This is called vector-based amplitude panning method. Fairly popular these days in this faculty. And so basically you create a sound image between these 3 speakers in the space somewhere. Now the question is, how many speakers do I need in order for the quality of this presentation to be good? That's one thing. And then the second thing, of course, is this calculation. That how should I do this calculation so that I don't lose quality when I'm doing it? Now, all of this is based on how our hearing system works. And of course, all of this is based on our directional hearing capability. And our directional hearing capability is mainly created by the external ear shape of our head and the fact that we have 2 ears separated by distance. And this is a filter. And this is an interesting thing about this. And when you start measuring what kind of filter this is, and here you can see a Japanese university. They've made a measurement of this on the horizontal plane. On the horizontal plane, when you go around your head, you can see that you have a magnitude response variation of more than 20 dB for a normal healthy adult people. So it's a very significant filter, but we don't experience this as a coloration. So basically we have, for some reason, learned to interpret this automatically as direction of audio, which is very interesting. But when you realize this, you also understand that if we have some other mechanisms, whatever they might be, loudspeakers, room, acoustics, or some other factor that modifies this, they modify this filter, then things are going to start moving and changing, and the locations of where things are supposed to be, they are no longer there. They seem to be somewhere else. So everything that we have talked about, loudspeaker quality, loudspeaker equalization, room acoustic compensation, applies 100% here. Because we have this kind of connection in play. So when we are listening to something, we are listening to the quality of the audio source, the original recording. This is the artistic content. This is what has been created. And it's influenced by the presentation method, the loudspeaker. And the loudspeaker is influenced by the room. So what you are listening to is not the original audio, it's not the loudspeaker, but it's all of the 3 together. And so we have to try to take steps to eliminate the factors that are interfering and preventing me from hearing what originally has been recorded. Now, for immersive audio, there are 2 fundamental methods of doing this today. One method is so-called channel-based method, where the idea is that your recording medium contains X number of channels, and those channels have been defined by some method to exist somewhere in your listening space, in certain orientations, certain heights, and so on. And what you do is you record and reproduce these channels, and that's your presentation. And there are some systems that resort to this, like the Japanese NHK 22.2, that's a channel-based system. But then you have some other systems, and so the channel-based system basically, then when you're creating this audio, it's the matter of taking your audio material and then editing that to create these channels that you will then store. The modern new method where people are moving more towards is called object-based. Object-based separates audio content from the number of loudspeakers, the number of channels, and so on. So object-based audio is not linked to the physical method of presentation. And that's very interesting, and it's also very important. So what you are doing is you are recording and editing objects. Objects have properties or attributes. And these attributes determine where in space the object should exist, how loud it should be, and so on. And so it has certain properties, and you're editing those properties. And this means you need a rendering engine. And this rendering that's the buzzword of the day. Because in order to be able to play this kind of recording, you have to render it for a certain location. But this is why object-based audio is so interesting. Because now for the first time, we don't have a global agreement about how many loudspeakers, where they have to be, and so on. Because object-based recordings need rendering. So this means you can decide the precision of your presentation system. And then you can design the rendering to suit that purpose. So you can render with the required precision. So it's a different way of doing things, but it's highly interesting because of this property. So now, instead of what we did earlier, we take our raw material and then we edit the attributes for our objects, and we edit the objects. And there may be X number of objects that has absolutely no relationship to the number of presentation channels that we are going to use later. So, if you look at the global picture of audio reproduction systems, we start from mono, of course. Then we got stereo. So, stereo, we represent the sound stage. We had the virtual sound image. So, initially we didn't. It was ping pong, and we had, the piano over there, the trombone over here. But then, soon after that, we started realizing that we can actually create the sound stage, and we can start creating depth, and we can present a view into the sound. So now, then we have also been working with these single layer surround audio systems for quite some time now, where we have X number of channels on one plane around ourselves in certain orientations. And these can, of course, create soundstage, create virtual sound images, but they also provide envelopment. So we have been moving one step further to the sensation of being inside audio. And now, at the moment, we are over here. We have multiple layers, typically 2 layers of loudspeakers. And we are able to create also sensation of height, not only horizontal orientation or location for these virtual sound images. We can create localization, virtual sound locations, and immersion. So for the first time. Now, how realistic this immersion is depends on many things, but of course it depends on how complete your audio reproduction system is, how capable it is in presenting audio for your ears, how robust it is against rejecting the influence of the room and other unwanted influences. And now we are also moving forwards. NHK 22.2 is the first 3-layer reproduction system to come into practical use in the near future. And then in the laboratories we have unlimited number of height channels, or height layers to be exact. So we have improving immersion basically that we are talking about here. So now we are step by step moving towards recording systems and reproduction systems that are becoming increasingly realistic and increasingly capable of rejecting, for example, the room influence when they are presenting audio. Now, when we are monitoring audio, we have 2 fundamental methods, headphones and loudspeakers, and they share the same the property of having a certain ability to create, deliver dynamic range. So we have the noise floor here, we have the maximum signal level there, and this is the dynamic range that we can enjoy, that we can hear. And this is one aspect that we are working with heavily. But then when we start to create virtual sound images, headphones don't do it in the same way. They are not as capable of doing this. Certainly headphones without any additional processing create sound that seems to be inside my head. So it doesn't really create me a sound stage at all. Today people are increasingly coming out with some processing methods that externalize audio. So even if you're using headphones, you would get the impression that the audio is over there. And this is probably going to improve in the future. So maybe in the future we can have a situation where we could use headphones reliably to design sound stage presentations and edit details of that. We are not there yet, but we are going there hopefully. But we have loudspeakers, and with loudspeakers we can create solid, stable presentations of the sound stage and virtual sound images. A loudspeaker clearly localizes out of your head in a certain orientation. And two loudspeakers do the same, but they also can create this soundstage presentation. So this is the reason why people are working very hard on using headphones for immersive sound presentation, but we have some way to go before we are there. So at the moment we are resorting to using loudspeakers. Now I'll quickly go through some of the systems people are working with today, and I think you're familiar with these. This is the Dolby Home format, where you have a front loudspeaker system and one layer with some surround capability, and then you have another layer of loudspeakers. So this is a two-layer system. It provides you some immersion. Now the question is, what kind of details this kind of system can deliver? This is always the question for any of these systems. When we go to theatre, then we need more loudspeakers. So this is an example of the theatrical layout. This is the front view to the front. So here's your front loudspeaker system. Here are your side speakers. Here are your ceiling speakers, and you see the side speakers there, and your ceiling speakers there. And you have a speaker system in two layers again around you, and it creates a similar kind of envelopment for a slightly larger number of people. Then we have oral 3D formats. This is 13.1. We have two layers, and this voice of God loudspeaker that's directly above you, but since the height of that cannot really be judged very precisely, I would still call this a two-layer system for practical purposes. And then we have a slightly smaller version of this 10.1 version, where you again have two layers and a slightly smaller number of loudspeakers. Then we have the NHK 22.2 system, where we have the ear height layer. In this case, it seems that these people are a bit lower, but the intention is that the middle layer would be approximately at the ear height. And then we have another layer below the ear height, and then we have another layer above the ear height. So it's a three-layer system. The motivation for this has to do with the very large image. So basically this lower layer mostly exists in the front. It doesn't exist in the side or rear. And the idea is to be able to fill this area equivalent to the image with virtual sound images that can be put at the same location where the video image is. And you can create these virtual sound images across the whole screen, basically. Then we have ITU and EBU working with these immersive sound formats as well. And again, these documents are freely available. So if you want to read more details about these and very excellent summaries of the immersive audio situation, then I recommend that you download some of these PDF files and and just read them. Let's look at some of the motivations for doing this thing. This is ITU's motivation for creating an immersive sound system. So for the area where you have the large image, we would like to have the ability to move the virtual sound image to the location where the video image seems to be, across the whole width and height of the large image. And then in other orientations, we would like to create a realistic sensation of being immersed in audio. Then, of course, because of historical reasons, they would like to have compatibility and live recording and mixing capability. Those are kind of additional requirements here. And lastly, they would like this ability to exist for large seating area. And as you know, there has been a number of systems that can deliver realistic immersion for one person. But if you have more than one person, then you can't have it. So for these systems, one of the main motivations is that this illusion should exist for a larger seating area. And this usually calls for a sufficiently large number of physical loudspeakers to be used, because a physical loudspeaker is something that we can always localize at the right orientation. Then going onwards, we have these scalable immersive systems like the MBH, a coding system where basically the big word is rendering. So they have a very compact storage format that can deliver the audio. But then you have to decode it, render it for a certain space. So this is, for example, a demo space from NAB in Las Vegas 2016. They had 1, 2, 3, 4 layers in this presentation. And it's all about just putting the right settings in the rendering engine in order to do this. Because this is something you decide at the time of playback. Then we have recording methods, and before showing this to you, I realized that this is not a complete presentation of the immersive audio recording methods, but these are maybe the more untypical microphoning methods. So this is the ambisonic format. It has been around for quite some time, and it is able to provide you immersive audio recording. But then when we go to higher order ambisonics, we can actually create a situation where we can record more precisely the orientation of the audio source. And at the same time, if we use technology like wavefield synthesis, we can create a reproduction of this situation so that the audio seems to emanate from that point in space, even if we actually don't have physical loudspeakers there. We actually have physical loudspeakers on the perimeter of this presentation range here, but when these work together, nicely time aligned and so on, then they can create a waveform that seems to emanate from free air. And there are some theatrical implementations of this method in existence. I tried to figure out whether we should call this a multi-layer system or not, but the examples I could find of this were all a single-layer presentation, so that remains to be solved later. Then, if we think of the common denominators for immersive reproduction systems, that's an interesting question. That what are the common features for all of these immersive systems? Now, usually we start from this assumption that the recording space, the recording layout, the recording technology is somehow equivalent to the presentation stage. Now you realize when I say this that I just said that for the object-based method we have the rendering, so there's a certain discontinuity there. But in order to design the immersive presentation, typically today the requirement seems to be that we are in a studio where the layout, number of loudspeakers, where they are, realistically presents the actual final presentation system. So that the person who is designing the audio content can get the right impression. And that impression then will be delivered to the customer. So this assumption about similarity seems to exist. Then many times, and this is something where I would ask you to pay attention to how different systems present themselves. Many times there seems to be the assumption that all physical loudspeakers that are part of the system are at equal distance, both vertically and horizontally from the listener. And they deliver sound at equal level and with equal time. So from the practical point of view, if we didn't have any electronic way of timing the loudspeakers, we would put them at equal physical distance from the listener in order to create the situation and then adjust the levels to be correct. But it doesn't stop there, because usually also there's an assumption that the character, the sound quality that is delivered by these individual loudspeakers is the same. There are no differences between the loudspeakers. So there's usually somewhere a specification of what happens from all the different loudspeakers at the listening location. So all loudspeakers deliver a certain quality of audio to the listening location. And there's usually a frequency and width specification, accuracy or flatness specification, and so on. And there's usually also a maximum sound pressure level specification as well. There may also be a reference monitoring level specification, which has a lot to do with the way our hearing system is working again. So the common features, the main channels typically are said to be a full bandwidth. But increasingly today you see system specifications that allow the use of subwoofers, which means that you split this this audio reproduction between a subwoofer and a main speaker. And when you have a subwoofer, you are in a very good situation, because you can place the subwoofer in a slightly different physical location in the room. A location that enables radiation of low frequencies efficiently and with high quality to the listening position. So this is the reason why subwoofers are becoming increasingly popular, also for immersive audio reproduction systems. Typically, in order to get to the specification, first of all, of course, you use high-quality loudspeakers with sufficient performance characteristics. But because we know the room is going to have an influence, we have to account for this. So usually it's necessary to do some kind of in-room equalization in order to render the individual loudspeakers as similar as possible for the sake of reproduction. Then we usually have to use fixed and agreed playback level. And this is necessary in order to create always the same impression of the sound balance. Then let's talk about the dynamic range requirement and maximum SPL requirement for these systems. So we have the room noise level somewhere and the audio reproduction system capacity maximum somewhere. And this defines as the audible dynamic range that we can enjoy. Now, in realistic installations, usually you cannot actually place the loudspeakers at equal distance. There are many reasons for this. It could be the ceiling height or some other very mechanical reason. And this may, for example, dictate a system where you just simply have a longer distance from one of the loudspeakers than maybe from another. And because the distance is longer and we have a radiator that basically has attenuation of audio as a function of distance. So the inverse square law applies here to the audio level. Then it means that if this speaker is further away than this speaker, then the maximum SPL that this must be able to deliver will be slightly higher than for this particular loudspeaker. In practical situations, we can see, for example, rooms being designed such that we would be having approximately the same distance to the listening location from all the loudspeakers. Like here's the listening location. This distance is approximately the same as the distance to the ceiling here. So this room has been designed to be mechanically providing the same physical distance for the loudspeakers. Now, what is this used for? If we consider the system performance, the individual loudspeaker performance, then one of the traditional ways of thinking has been that we can maybe economize on certain orientations. That maybe the loudspeakers to my side or to the ceiling or to the rear don't have to have the same performance as the loudspeakers in the front. And if we assume this, then we should do some careful thinking to see whether this is actually correct judgment of the situation or not. Typically, the sound images that are rendered with this kind of systems could include, for example, this kind of situation where we have a high sound level event happening and it's moving along in space. So effectively it's moving from one loudspeaker to another. And when this happens, obviously if we have a failure of some loudspeaker to deliver the same maximum SPL as the other loudspeaker, we will have some very interesting and unwanted sound effects happen when we are playing this reproduction system at close to its highest capacity level. Now, how much level do different systems require? There are actually two ways of approaching this at the moment. One is the ITU approach, and the other one is kind of rest of the world at the moment. Sorry, EBU. So EBU is thinking at the moment that the maximum sound level to be delivered reduces as a function of the number of loudspeakers in my presentation system. So if I have a large number of loudspeakers, then for the individual loudspeaker, I could use less performance. Now, unfortunately, many other system designers do not agree with this at the moment. So they are thinking that they want the same maximum performance for every single loudspeaker, irrespective of how many loudspeakers there are. So hopefully this thinking will develop in the future, but at the moment it seems that Dolby and then the American SMPTE are sharing this other view of how things should work. Now then the big question, if we start actually selecting loudspeakers for a particular system, is how much is the distance? Because this is going to be one of the critical aspects here. And we have done some studies about that, and this is a study of high-quality three-way loudspeakers, mostly stereo